All right, today we're going to crack open one of Latin America's most significant and honestly most mysterious political texts, Juan Domingo Perón's The Organized Community. This is a document that was born from a really strange moment in history, and its story, well, it's full of puzzles. So let's just dive right in.
So this is how Perón kicks things off. Not with some big political rally cry, but with this really philosophical thought about the burden of leadership. It immediately sets a tone that, kind of makes you scratch your head. It's not what you'd expect.
So let's set the scene. Where did all this go down? The year is 1949. We're in Mendoza, Argentina for the very first National Congress of Philosophy. And you have to understand, this was not just some small local get-together. This was a massive global intellectual summit.
And this is where the story gets really wild. Just picture it, a populist, military-trained president whose government was often painted as anti-intellectual is playing host to the world's greatest thinkers. I mean, it was such a bold, symbolic, and frankly, a very confusing move.
And just look at this guest list. We're talking about the absolute heavyweights of 20th century philosophy. You've got giants like Heidegger, Russell, and Gadamer all participating. The intellectual firepower in that room was just immense. And that really is the central question of this whole explainer, isn't it? Why go to all this trouble? What was Perón trying to accomplish by putting himself and his whole political project right in the middle of this super high-level philosophical debate?
Well, the answer starts with the speech itself. At the closing ceremony, Perón got up to present what he basically called the philosophical foundation of his entire movement. But there's a catch, and it's a pretty big one.
He stands up in front of this incredibly distinguished audience, ready to lay out the intellectual soul of his so-called third position. The official, published version of this speech would later become the book we know as The Organized Community.
But here's the puzzle. If you were to take the complete text of that speech and read it out loud, at a normal speaking pace, it would take you over 4 hours.
That is an impossibly long speech for a closing ceremony. I mean, come on, no audience, no matter how smart they are, is going to sit through that. So, what really happened that day?
Well, when you look at the historical record, the whole thing gets even more mysterious. Turns out Perón only spoke for about an hour. He just read parts of the beginning and the end. And that famous title, it wasn't even given to the text until years later. On top of all that, scholars still argue about who actually wrote the really dense philosophical parts. This thing wasn't just a speech. It was a carefully crafted historical object.
Okay, so if the speech itself is a bit of a puzzle, what about the ideas in it? What was the actual point he was trying to make? Well, Perón was trying to position his movement, Justicialismo, as the answer to the huge ideological battle of the 20th century.
Think about it. In the post-war world, you basically had two giants pushing their systems on everyone. American individualism and capitalism on one side, and Soviet collectivism and communism on the other. Perón was basically saying, nope, Argentina doesn't have to pick a side. We can forge our own path.
So the text really goes after two extremes. On one side, you have this idea of unchecked individualism, which it says leads to a dog-eat-dog world. On the other side, you have communism, where the state just completely crushes the individual. The third position was meant to be a perfect, harmonious balance right in the middle.
And this right here, this phrase, is the philosophical heart of the entire project. The idea wasn't for the I, the individual, to get lost in the we, the community. And it wasn't for the I to dominate the we either. The goal was for a person to find their true, best self through being part of a harmonious community.
Now, this wasn't just some abstract theory meant to impress a room full of philosophers. Oh, no. Perón was making a very direct, very powerful connection between this philosophy and the actual legal foundation of the entire country.
I mean, just look at this timing. It's wild. Less than 1 month after Argentina enacts a brand new constitution, Perón delivers this speech. The two events are totally connected. It's kind of like he gave the country new hardware, and then he showed up to install the philosophical operating system.
Perón himself said that the ideas in his speech were already being put into practice, that they were literally baked into the new constitution. He was spelling out the why behind the what of the new Argentine state.
And you can literally see this philosophy getting written into the law books. Take Article 37 of that new constitution. It established all these new social rights, the right to fair pay, to social security, to education. These weren't just laws. They were the legal expression of that organized community ideal.
But of course, the story doesn't just stop there in 1949. Like any really powerful political text, the meaning and the legacy of the organized community have been fought over ever since.
The whole authorship question is a perfect example. People always ask, did he really write this himself? While you'll hear names like the philosopher Carlos Estrada thrown around as collaborators, the general consensus among scholars is that, yeah, many hands probably helped draft it. But the core ideas, the political vision, the final product, that was without a doubt Péron's.
After Perón was overthrown in 1955, his enemies often interpreted the text through what you might call a fascist key, seeing it as a blueprint for an authoritarian state. But more recently, a lot of scholars have started reevaluating it, looking at it through a democratic horizon, focusing more on its ideas about community and social justice.
And I think that's the real key takeaway here. This text isn't some dusty old historical artifact sitting on a shelf. It's a living document. Its meaning is still being fought over in Argentina and around the world, with every new generation reading it in the context of their own time and their own struggles. So, if we had to just boil it all down, the organized community is this vision for a society that actively tries to balance the needs of the individual with the good of the group. It's about trying to create a world that balances personal freedom with our responsibility to each other. And all this kind of leaves us with a final, bigger question, doesn't it? Can a text like this ever really have one single fixed meaning? Or is its true meaning found not just in what the author intended, but in how it gets reinterpreted and challenged and brought back to life over and over again by the people who come after?